like politics are helpless, and it's kind of the system's rigged against you, and we see lobbyists get rich every year. There's never any legislation passed that I would say is exciting for, at least for me, and not in this room. That's not to say for everyone. There's some lobbyist interests that are affected. But I would say, kind of counter to that is this room, the delegates. What is refreshing is how engaged everyone is, and especially the state delegates, to really personally vet me, personally vet Mark, and all the candidates in this race, and ensure that convention vetting selects the candidate that is most compatible with the community and will represent community interests, which is why I'll start off with saying I want to repeal SB 54. I think a lot of the issues we face at the federal level are as a result of SB 54. When you can grab 500 signatures, get on the primary, and a shadowy lobbyist like the AFP can send out snazzy flyers about you for more taxes and look at this and pour a lot of money and resources behind you into low information voters, not in this room, but low information voters, you get lobbyist interests represented. What I will start this conversation off with is that on self-funding, no one has bought and paid for my campaign. I made that conscious effort, and I don't fund candidates who aren't self-funded. What I do take issue with is candidates that are accepting funding from interests and special interest lobbies that are actively pushing legislations that would be devastating to our community. You're going to hear me talk a little bit about the AFP tonight, which me and Mark both, Kevin Green personally emailed me because I'm director of the AFP, and asked this both national lobby, and they have a big Utah operation with 5 registered lobbyists. They seconded one of their top lobbyists from DC this year to come to Utah to lobby for the one piece of legislation they lobbied for this year, is HB 184. HB 184 would be the most, in terms of what would impact us, and this is, I would say this isn't about property taxes, because it will also have a downstream impact on property taxes. HB 184, which is what they're pushing for next year, and what they pushed for this year in a guiding committee, was the law that you may have seen headlines about that would do away with all local zoning and planning authority. It's called, they call it under the property rights bill. I'll speak for myself, and I believe I'm speaking for Mark when I say to both of us. I never returned Kevin Green's email. And gave me his personal cell phone number, encouraged me to call him to talk about the AFP advantage and how they want to get behind a candidate in this race. And there is one candidate in this race that not only returned that call, but also is actively working with them to get the next year's version of HB 184. We got lucky this year because the League of Cities and Towns put on their HB. I would say when you look at how these bills come together, is they come together 6 to 8 months in advance, and they're pre-negotiated by lobbies. League of Cities and Towns has been funded by, usually, Summit County uses them, I think the Wasatch County uses the UAC. League of Cities and Towns, it's usually a little bit more influence. They'll be negotiating, and they pay the politicians too, they'll be negotiating against the real estate lobby, in this case it's the AFP, to try to get these pieces of legislation passed. And they put their team on it and kill it. The AFP learned from that this year, and they're funding this race in particular is their most important race. They're dumping, I would estimate, at least $10,000 so far into this race. You've probably seen their flyers. The dedicated personnel going door to door in some cases, and they're going to try to push to get rid of, push their property rights bills. Just so you know, their clients are real estate developers who don't live in this county, who bought parcels up in the North Field, will benefit from the highway option B, and want to strip Wasatch County and Heber City of all local plan authorities. I could buy that parcel of land and build the Empire State Building on it. So this will be a sea of high-density housing. What they focused on is something called regulatory arbitrage. Regulatory arbitrage is where you buy a piece of land that has regulations on it that make it not that valuable. In the Koch brothers case, it's Koch brothers, never Trump, by the way. They buy a piece of land, it's zoned for one thing. However, if you could change that zoning through property rights, that $1 million piece of land becomes worth $20 million because you can build, whereas before you could build one house for 20 acres, now you can build 100 houses at a development profit of worth $20 million. That's what we're fighting against this race. And I'm self-funded, so I want everyone in this room to know before I get started on my story, is that that's important to me. That I don't fault people for not being self-funded. I do fault people for who they choose to associate themselves with. So getting that out of the way and talking about the need to keep money out of our politics, especially our primary, to make sure the community selects with proper vetting and extensive vetting, as you guys are getting here, getting to spend hours with the candidates. That will solve this, but until then, people need to be aware of who's trying to influence the election. So many of you don't know me, so I'm going to start. That's a long-winded way of saying why I'm in this race, why this race is personal and important to me, and why everyone in this room should be very aware of what forces want who to win and who represents it. My lobby is you guys. And my own self-funding, so that can be the case. And I think that's very important. And that's why I love the conferences and why it's so refreshing to see everyone here. Let me get into background, and then I'll go straight to Q&A, so I don't waste my time. By way of background, I'm a fourth-generation Utah. My family originally came to Utah in 1852 on Hunt Company wagons and settled in the Ogden Valley. My parents, who are right there, Ron and Eileen, say hi to them, they're going to live. They live in Utah County. My brother has 4 children, lives in a sugar house. My sister lives in Riverton with her husband, has one on the way, and that's I'm proud to say to him. So before we emigrated to Utah, I actually had stopped going all the way back to 1622 when my family came across all my early ships and so just outside of Kingston. So this country is very important to me, and Utah particularly, like many of you in this room, can consider my ancestral homeland. And I want to protect it against interests, oftentimes globalist interests that are trying to change, kind of what it was before. My personal journey had a detour for 20 years in New York City. Graduated from New York University with a degree in economics and mathematics. Graduated summa cum laude. Then went to investment banking for a couple of years, and then spent the majority of those next 5 years in the hedge fund industry. I got an early reputation in that industry at the highest levels of finance by leading as the restructuring of General Growth Properties, which at the time was the largest, I still believe it is the largest real estate restructuring in U.S. history. And I kind of built up a reputation for myself within that industry by beating up Bill Ackman to lead the the debt financing, which was a very successful restructuring. People made a lot of money, we saved a lot of jobs, and that company was rescued. So I was very proud of that. I ultimately, I managed many billions of dollars working for the largest hedge funds. And then towards the end of my career, Wall Street, I started my own hedge fund. And I grew to be an SEC registered hedge fund with hundreds of millions of dollars under management. And just a little under a decade ago, I had the opportunity to move back to Utah and took it. So I've been here for quite some time now. Since retired from the hedge fund industry, I do have other business interests that I pursue here, but nothing that wouldn't prevent me from working full-time representing you guys in the state. So that's my personal journey. I never, wanted to be in politics. As many of you can tell, I'm not really the most natural politician. But when I saw Kohler was stepping down from the seat, he's a man I greatly admire, and I definitely always had his best interests at heart. I kind of looked at the field and saw that one candidate was in favor of the CRA, and also was the sole vote against the conservation easement in the fields, and in his own words, wanted the highway to come through because growth was coming and we needed to prepare for it. And I just philosophically, I couldn't stand by and see someone without giving me an alternative and stepping to brace myself. So that day, which was I think it was the last day I could file, unplanned, went down to the clerk's office and paid the $60 and got into this race. So that's my super. I wasn't planning to run, but you can see when I filed, it's like literally 10 minutes before the buzzer. In terms of agenda, my agenda has largely been shaped by my conversations I've been having with all of you. I'd say that the top issue I keep hearing about, and it hits me too personally, is property taxes. I want to start with a story that I heard from a delegate. And if you're, I haven't seen that delegate, but if that delegate's in the room, don't worry, I'm not going to dox you. This was a couple. They sold their business about 15 years ago, and they bought a home in rural Wasatch County. When they first moved into their house, their property tax bill was around $4,000 a year, and their annual insurance bill was $3,000 a year. That bill was easily covered by their Social Security, and because they had a nice investment portfolio from the sale of their business, they were going to be able to fund a nice, comfortable, not a lavish retirement, but a comfortable retirement off of the investment income off their investment portfolio. Fast forward to last year, their property tax bill has gone from $4,000 to just under $20,000 this year. And their insurance bill's gone from $3,000 to $14,000. And they told me that their savings are rapidly being depleted, so the equity that they have that is funding the investment gains and the interest that is funding their lifestyle is rapidly depleting. And within 3 years, her and her husband are going to need to move out of their houses. That is wrong. That's wrong. That needs to be changed. That can be changed. There are 17 states that have a model that would fix this overnight. And in year one, I will propose legislation to, and just to take a step back, that's not an isolated story. That was probably the most extreme story I've heard. I've heard 5 stories from 5 different delegates with the same exact thing, that I'm going to have to sell my house in 5 years. And as I hear this, I look, well, why hasn't Wasatch, why haven't local? I think a lot of it has to happen at the state level, but there's more that could have been done at the local level for this. And on that CRA vote, there were people giving testimonials against the CRA. And it's on, if you go to careforutah.com at YouTube, where a Midway resident talks about that local redistribution and how seniors were being kicked out of their house years ago. This problem has been known about for a long time and hasn't been dealt with.
Hey, Jeff. Yeah, I just want to tell you, we've got about 7, 8 minutes left. So
okay.
If anybody has questions.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just finish this up. So on this particular issue, I'm going to go to questions here in 1 minute. This particular issue, my plan would apply to people who are about 50 years old. We would go to cost basis accounting for property taxes. So your property tax bill would be the higher of your historical cost of your house, grown at 2% a year, which in this particular case would be north of a 50% reduction and allow their Social Security to cover their property tax bill as it should be. The local municipality, and this would only apply to primary residences, so it wouldn't hit other property owners disproportionately. It would only be for people above 50. So we need to get this bill passed this year. That will be my top legislative priority. With regards to local land planning, before I get into the Q&A, we need someone that can fight the EFP. The legislation that all of you, besides property taxes, should be worried about is the successor bill to HB 184. HB 184 will allow the development of all these fields into high-density housing that will be paved over, will be gross version of Warren, and whether you're in Summit County, I tell myself, county government, it's the same thing. This is the most important issue to you. Because if this gets converted to high-density housing, it's over for Summit County too. And we need someone that's able to fight the AFP, not someone who's taking money from the AFP. And that's, there's a reason why they've, by my estimates, have dumped over $10,000 into this race. And this is their most important race. And they will have probably 5 new legislators that they're endorsing and supporting this year that are prepared to vote for that. We need someone in this seat because this is where they stand to make the most money, doing their regulatory arbitrage, making a worthless piece of land worth tens of millions of dollars, and that's what they're paid to do. We need someone to fight against that, not someone who's going to vote for it. I will be that person. And if I'm the presumptive nominee out of the convention, I'm not going to wait until November. I'm going to go to Summit County, request access to the League of Cities and Towns, and personally supervise all the real estate lobby's legislation So we're ready to go. And changing it before it hits the House floor, way easier to do than waiting for public comment on the House floor. And like I said, repeating SB 54 solves all these. And I'll open it up for questions since we only have like 5 minutes left. But that's why I'm in this race.